Okay. All right. We are on. How is everyone today? Thank you so much for joining me. I'm glad there's so many people are interested in this, and I'm going to try to get as much as I can throughout this session in 90 minutes or less, and I will try to leave at least 10 minutes, hopefully, at the end of the session for questions, but you can certainly type into the chat box. But let's do a little bit of housekeeping, and just this is everything you wanted to know about COVID-19 in 90 minutes or less, just in case you were thinking you were at some other webinar session. So I'm Melissa Garcia, and I am one of the shareholders at Altitude, and I love to teach, and I would rather be in front of you in a physical room, but this is the reality of today. So on your screen, some housekeeping items. On your screen, you will see the PowerPoint presentation in the center of your screen. This should take up most of the screen. There should also be a small box on the bottom right-hand side of the screen with the video feed, i.e. the presenter me. On the left side of the menu, please select the questions and answer icon. You'll see a little question mark over there, and type all your questions there, which will be addressed at the end of the webinar. CMCA credits are automatically generated once the webinar hosting site provides an attendance confirmation report, and will be sent via email within 48 hours following the webinar. These credits are not transferable. Please email education@altitude.law or call directly at 303-991-2064 if you have any questions about receiving your CMCA certificates. And a couple of other things. I know we're talking about COVID today, but our next webinar is June 10th at noon, which will be our legislative and case law updates. And also, this is exciting news. CAI, for those of you who don't know who CAI is, that's a national resource for all HOAs. We have two great chapters here in Colorado, the Rocky Mountain chapter and the Southern Colorado chapter. But CAI National has these great COVID Q&A sessions that, Q&A sessions that they give on a regular basis. They're webinars that they have expert panelists across the country participate, and our own Alina Gilbert will be participating tomorrow at 12:15 p.m. on a Q&A session with CAI National on CDC guidelines and how they impact associations. So make sure that you register for that, and you just Google Community Association Institute, and you should be able to navigate your way to those webinars. So the outline for today's webinar. First of all, we'll talk about two overarching principles that you should always keep in mind whenever you're making decisions. Then we'll talk about the general challenges of some COVID-19 issues that are kind of applicable no matter where we are in terms of the COVID world and the updated orders. There are always going to be issues. Then we'll talk about the original lockdown order for just a minute, because a lot of the things didn't change there. They translated into the safer at home order, but we'll talk about some of the FAQs there. And then FAQs regarding how to move forward. So the safer at home order, of course, we're going to talk about pools as well. As you know, as you may know, today was, another order was issued by the governor last night. And it did make slight changes with respect to pools, which we will discuss about that. So let's just go ahead and get started. I have a lot to talk about. And along the way, I'm going to give you a couple of pointers. And then we will leave some minutes for questions at the end. So one other thing, I'm an attorney, so I have to do the thing about the disclaimer. We're providing information and guidance, not legal advice. I mean, this is uncharted, unprecedented territory. I'm sure you've heard that many times, and keep this in mind as things change every day. So what I'm talking about today, it's not legal advice, it's guidance. I'm trying to do a lot of issue spotting and respond to questions that have come up over the last several months. If you have a particular question about your particular association, though, you really ought to talk to your attorney, and because they're going to have to look at things like the governing documents and look at your particular association to give you actual legal advice on this. All right, so let's first talk about the two overarching principles to keep in mind. So you have weathered the initial shock and awe of COVID-19 in all its glory, which none of us were prepared for. Sure, we knew about the floods and we know about fires and tornadoes and everything, But a pandemic, this is more like the stuff of movies or zombie territory. There's no playbook for the pandemic. What one of my coworkers, Amanda Ashley, says, we're now living La Vida COVID. So I forgot to bring my music for the background, but you can sing it along when you're thinking about this. So amidst all the confusion, changing mandates, new problems that crop up, all the questions that you get from all the homeowners, I want you to keep two principles in mind. And that is this, number one, your fiduciary duty, which we'll talk about. And number two, the business judgment rule. I mean, these two things really should serve as the foundation for all your decision making. So when you're questioning what to do, come back to these two slides. They assist you in protecting you and your association, particularly if these decisions get challenged, which, everybody kind of gets mad whatever you do. So you need to remember these two principles with respect to any kind of decision making, and it really does protect you from liability. So let's talk about the first one, fiduciary duty. What is a fiduciary duty? So, I mean, I know a lot of you have been probably practicing for quite some time, and maybe you have some new board members that you were tricked into running into the board. I always say you go to the bathroom during the annual meeting election, you come out, all of a sudden you're president. Yeah, it's a tired joke, but I still keep saying it. But at any rate, that's how a lot of homeowners get on the board, and they don't realize what they've taken on. And essentially, a fiduciary is a position of trust. People elected you and placed you in this trust. They're entrusting you to protect the assets of the association. They're entrusting to maintain the common elements, to manage the finances wisely. As a fiduciary, you are a person that has been entrusted with the property and the power for the benefit of another. And who's that another? That is the association. You owe the duty to the association, and that's an important principle. So what does that mean in terms of the standard of care? So in order to comply with your fiduciary duty, you need to, among other things, make decisions according to a particular standard of care. And that is right there on the slide. Act in good faith, prudently, and in the best interest of the association. I bolded that again because that's really important. This is overarching principle number one. Make decisions that are prudent, which is the second little bullet point there. That means informed, means ask a lot of questions. If you're unsure, talk to experts about this. And make those decisions so that they protect the association, not in the best interests of maybe a particular group of homeowners, not in the best interests of just the board members, not in the best interest of the loudest crowd of people. I mean, now is the time that you've got to really think about the association as a corporation, because it's easy to react to COVID-19 and make quick decisions that are not going to serve the interests of the association, but they might serve a particular group of people. Now more than ever, you should not just be thinking about reacting to the short-term effects of COVID-19, but also about how your decisions are going to affect tomorrow. We'll talk a little bit about assessments and collections of delinquent assessments later in the presentation, but that's a perfect example. So the scope of duty. As far as the scope of duty, it doesn't mean now all of a sudden there's COVID, you have to be some kind of virus specialist or a health expert or anything like that, or take on additional roles that you might be tempted to take. Everyone was not magically granted some additional or emergency powers to handle things. Your duty requires you to exercise prudence in your role as a board member. So how do you know what this duty is, what this role is? Just remember, it's in the role of a board member, nothing else, okay? And we'll cement that principle later on down where we're talking about examples. So how do you figure out what that role is? First, realize the importance of your governing documents. The board's powers are driven by what the association's governing documents say. That's your declaration, your articles, your bylaws, etc. That's a whole class in itself, but this dictates your authority to regulate. So if someone challenges your decision, the courts are going to go back and look at your authority. What's your authority for taking that action? So as it relates to COVID-19, I doubt your documents say something like, if faced with a pandemic, this is what you do. However, if someone's angry because you decided to keep the swimming pool closed and your decision was challenged. The court's going to look at your docs to verify your authority to keep the swimming pool closed, or if you decided to open the swimming pool, to open the swimming pool. They're going to look at your documents. And I'd be very surprised if your documents didn't give you the authority to regulate the common elements. So that's your jurisdiction. You have authority to regulate the common elements. That's what you should look at in terms of your role as a board of director, as the board of directors. Second, realize the importance of state and local ordinances. Remember the good old days when the only time you looked at the local ordinance was when you're trying to figure out whether chickens were allowed or whether pit bulls were allowed, or what are the short-term rental restrictions. In COVID world, Colorado has a safer at home order, which is much broader than the ordinance, saying that you have to have up to 3 chickens, for example. So the state and local ordinances don't change your duty, but they might affect how you carry out your duty. They might limit your regulation authority in some ways, and they may create a heightened duty. You need to know what's in those orders to determine how you comply with respect to your jurisdiction. You can also use the language in those orders, both the state and the local orders, in order to use as a basis to support your decision, whether it's opening the pool or closing the pool. I always use that because that's the most popular example. Even if the order doesn't directly apply to you, remember when you're a board member, you can make informed decisions, and you can use what information is in front of you to make those informed decisions. Additionally, you need to know the state and the local ordinances, because some of them are stricter than the state order, and some counties have applied for variances, so they're less strict than the state order. So just as a general principle, know these. The other thing that you got to remember is, the question comes up, is there a heightened duty? Yes, you still have the same duty to maintain the common elements and do other things that you're supposed to do under your governing documents, but it might be heightened. For example, yesterday you had the duty to maintain the common elements. Today that duty is the same, but it's greater. That means something greater: heightened cleaning, disinfecting, sanitizing, moving furniture, all the things that residents have, touch all the time. You're increasing your cleaning protocol. So it's the same duty, which is maintain the common elements, but now it's taken on a greater significance. But it's still just a duty to maintain the common elements. Don't think that has changed to a duty to keep people safe and healthy. That's not your duty. Your duty isn't to ensure that the common elements are maintained so as not to create that additional risk for them to become infected, which brings me to my tip number 1, which is stay in your lane. It's very easy to have knee-jerk reactions to a crisis, cue the toilet paper fiasco, but need to take some time to make a reasoned decision. If you exceed your authority, this invites liability. People are very tempted to assume extra or emergency powers in response to the pandemic because it's a looming threat, and it continues to be a looming threat. There's a lot of uncertainty still about it. And so it's a natural knee-jerk reaction to panic, but just remember, don't exceed your role. Stay within the lane created by your governing documents, stay within the lane created by or clarified by the state and local ordinances, and make sure that if you're not sure what that role is, talk to your attorney. Okay, so that's a big one. Know what your fiduciary duty is. It's to act in the best interest of the association and prudently. We'll talk a little bit about that later on in respect to certain things. So the second thing that's very, very important is the business judgment rule. So hopefully you've heard of this as board members, but what is it? It is a rule that protects you. Under this rule, if you act according to the standard of care we talked about previously in the last slide, in good faith, prudently, and in the best interest of the association, then you will be protected from liability. So it's really as simple as that. The courts don't want to second guess your decisions as board members. They realize that you're not paid to be a board member, that they want to defer as long as you act according to the foregoing standard. Otherwise, nobody's going to serve on the board if they could be liable for all the decisions that they made on behalf of the association. However, you need to show prudence. That's how it provides protection, as long as you act according to the standard, but you need to show prudence. Remember, you need to act prudently. So the importance of relying on experts and the importance of a paper trail. those two components are really important in terms of showing that you made an informed, prudent decisions. Rely on the experts, rely on your attorneys, rely on your management companies, the local health authorities, the CDC, rely on the information in the current state and local mandates. And keep a paper trail, because this is, again, something that's going to show that, hey, we went through this entire decision-making process by asking a lot of questions, and then we came to this answer. Because, again, people are going to be angry no matter what you do. Unfortunately, that's what's been happening. They'll challenge you for closing the pool. They're challenging you for opening the pool. They'll challenge you for allowing people to come into the community, or for not allowing their construction project. Just if you're feeling angst, and you probably will be as a board member, remember the business judgment rule, because that's going to protect you. That's going to protect your actions. And that brings me to tip number 2, act in the best interest of the association. So always remember, when you're trying to protect, exercise the business judgment rule and get that protection, they're looking at the decisions in good faith, prudently, and in the best interest of the association, not in the best interest of a certain group of people, or your best interest, or the best interest of those who are have delinquencies, for example. That's a popular one. And sometimes these are hard decisions, but just remember that. Okay, let's talk about COVID-19 general FAQs. These, again, we're just kind of going through as many of these questions that come up, and then again, if you have additional ones, put them in the chat box, and I'll get to them at the end of the presentation. So, meeting FAQs. I was just on a Zoom meeting, quick sort of informal session, and we went over a lot of these questions there as well. So if you were on that, I have a couple of new things to say now that we've learned. I've learned a little bit more about Zoom. But the very first question, so can we still meet in person? So remember, and we'll talk about the Safer at Home order, one of the principles is that to maintain social distancing protocols, you need to have no groups that are more than 10 people, and you need to be able to be no closer than 6 feet apart. So I don't know if you've seen these things online about, like, the restaurants that have the noodles. They put the little hats on. They have these noodles that are 6 feet out, so you can't come anywhere closer than that noodle. I just think that's funny. I just want to wear one of those hats just for it. But anyway, so meet in person. Maybe as a board you can do that, because those protocols are in place, but not really for the annual meeting, because you have a lot of people at the annual meeting. So let's talk about the second question. Can we cancel, delay annual and board meetings? So for annual meetings, the answer is no. Kiowa, Colorado Common Interest Ownership Act, says you have to have at least one meeting a year. So that doesn't matter whether you're a pre or post Kiowa association. That's a whole other discussion of what's pre and post and everything. But if you're an association that's subject to Kiowa, then you have to have an annual meeting. So you can't cancel it. You know, life goes on. Business goes on, and you still have to run the association. So there's things that are too critical to delay. So you can delay, but not for too long, because there's things that are too critical. Maybe you need to elect directors. Maybe you need to get that budget ratified. So can we hold a virtual meeting? Yes. So Colorado law allows, and this is the Colorado Revised Nonprofit Corporation Act. We always talk about Kiowa. We don't talk too much about the nonprofit, but there is a lot of information there. So the Nonprofit Act does allow members to participate, in person, or also through any kind of method that allows you to hear each other simultaneously. So yes, you can hold a virtual meeting, but one of the things I talked about today that's a challenge is, you're on Zoom or GoToMeeting or whatever, and you have those controls that say mute or unmute. So if you're muting somebody, because, realistically, when you're going through the meeting, you should mute everybody until you as a chair recognize that person and they can discuss whatever they need to discuss at the appropriate time. But if the statute technically requires everybody to hear everybody at the same time, one of the issues that comes up is the chat box. See, if you're having somebody type in their question in the chat box, but then they're not heard by everyone else because they're typing the question and you're reading it. So, that's just technically to be compliant, for everyone to be able to hear each other. I would say unmute them, or maybe have something in the meeting protocols where you're allowing you to speak on their behalf and just read the question verbatim from the chat text box. But that's something that I just thought about today. So, Remember that Colorado law also requires you to follow all the meeting notice requirements. So remember to send notice like you would normally send a notice meeting. You're going to mail it or personally deliver if you have not too many members, but you're going to mail it. You need to physically post it somewhere conspicuously in the community. I mean, these are all already law and they still apply to these virtual meetings. You should state the time, date, and location. I'd say the location could be either the internet address, or you can say, no, the location is here's this particular place where we're holding the meeting, where the moderator is holding the meeting, and everybody else is participating virtually. But just comply with all the meeting requirements. So how do we, one of the questions that comes up is how do we handle secret ballots? Remember that the association, if you're a pre or post Kiowa association, if you have a contested election, that's one of the things that you have to, and does that ever happen? What is a contested election? That means more people are running for the positions that are open on the board. And so, yeah, usually you're just trying to get people to run for the board. But if you have that situation in a contested election of directors, then you have to have a secret ballot. Realistically, how are you going to do this on Zoom or go to meeting? Is there some mechanism? I don't think so. I haven't played with it as much, but I don't think there's something that allows you to preserve secrecy. I know that there's polling, which we talked about today in the prior Zoom session. But when sometimes these elections come down to, one vote, and how are you, I don't know what the mechanisms are for these pollings. Can you really show that these are X number of people that responded and X number of people that said yes or voted for whomever? So realistically, when you're thinking about secret ballots, you probably want to have some kind of hybrid meeting, which means that at the annual meeting itself, the agenda item is the call for nominations and the ability for the candidates to discuss and say why they should be on the board. And then that's it for the annual meeting. And then you conduct the vote by mail, so by mail ballot, which I think that's coming up in another section here. Let me see. Yeah, so we'll talk about in the next slide. So you have the hybrid meeting where you have the discussion online, and then you have the mail ballot afterwards. So that's how you deal with the secret ballots, so you can preserve the secrecy. So can homeowners still attend board meetings? Yes, just because the board might be conducting a meeting via Zoom or something, that doesn't mean that all of a sudden it's not a physical board meeting that homeowners are allowed to attend. So definitely, if somebody wants to attend a board meeting, then you give them the sign-in information, give it to them. You don't need to provide them the device to be able to access that meeting, but you should give them the sign-in information. And if anybody decides to act remotely, I mean, any board members decide to do this all virtually, then remember that the law requires, this is under Kiowa, the law requires that before you take action at a board meeting, then you have to open it up for the homeowners to be able to speak for or against whatever that action item is. So incorporate that into your board meeting protocol. And just in general, a comment is to revise your conduct of meetings to address some of these issues that we have now with virtual meetings. But just remember that. So the key is that the owners are still, you can still mute them, and so that you can proceed with your board meeting uninterrupted until the time that it's appropriate for homeowners to speak, whether that's the homeowner forum or right before you take a decision or make a decision as a board. The point is that they're entitled, and this is a good thing to be transparent and observe the decision-making process, and then speak at the appropriate time. Last thing on here, how do we handle executive sessions? So regardless of COVID, this has always been problematic. You don't really know when there's going to be a rogue board member that maybe lets somebody into executive session. For those of you who don't know what executive session is, that means closed session. There are certain things under Kiowa that allow you to go into discussion with just the board members and close it to everyone else. So I know under Zoom and probably GoToMeeting, you have the ability to make people leave that part of the virtual meeting and go into the lobby. And while they wait until you're done with your executive session, and then you can invite them back in. But the issue is that somebody, you don't really know who's in the room that could be listening to the conversation, just like at a conference call. And so hopefully people will act appropriately. And with executive sessions, just a tidbit, remember, Before you go into executive session, you have to discuss the category and speak to the minutes. This is going to be in the minutes, the category for which you are going into executive session. Once you get into executive session, you do what you need to under those specific categories in Kiowa. Don't exceed those categories. When you come out, if you've made a decision, you say, I come out of executive session at 7:30 p.m. and here is my decision. So that decision could be hiring a new attorney like Melissa Garcia, because why wouldn't you want to hire Melissa Garcia? Okay, so executive sessions, we talked about that. So can the board vote by email? Yeah, so this is something that is very important. I did talk, there's blogs that we've discussed about this, or that we sent out about this, but just remember, boards under current law, under the Colorado Revised Nonprofit Corporation Act, not Kiowa, but under the Nonprofit Act, can vote by email. The important distinction is that the law defers to your bylaws. So if you've just been acting as a board and just, sending out emails and say, board, vote by this email and by this date, and if you get a majority of the board to approve it, then you think you're all good, you might be all bad. So what the law says is it defers to your bylaws. Look to your bylaws, because the bylaws, surprisingly enough, they might not say anything about emails, because a lot of them were written decades ago, but they'll say things like action without a board meeting or consent to corporate action. Those are the two terms that I often see, which means acting by email. So search for that, because I'd say maybe 65–70% of those bylaws say that if you are taking action outside of a board meeting as a board, then you have to get a unanimous decision. And if it says in the bylaws that you have to get all board members to approve that particular action by email, then you have to follow that, or amend your bylaws to get rid of that and defer to the statute, the nonprofit code. So that's number one. Step number one is look at your bylaws. And then follow whatever is in your bylaws. They're all different. I mean, a lot of them say that you have to get unanimous approval. Some of them say other things. And this is, they're all different in terms of approval requirements as well as procedural requirements. So look to your bylaws. If your bylaws are silent or they defer to the nonprofit code, then it's also important to understand the specific language of the nonprofit code, because it's not the same as a regular board meeting. So I'm going to be very quick about the summary about this, but essentially what you're doing under the nonprofit code is you're sending an email to all the directors. You're stating the time and date by when they have to respond. And essentially the number of responses in favor of the proposed action has to equal or exceed what would be necessary if all directors in office were voting. So that's very different from a board meeting, right? A regular board meeting, because at a board meeting, you need to have a majority that show up. That's a quorum usually. You need to have a quorum of directors to show up, because that's a majority usually. And then assuming a majority shows up, assuming a quorum shows up, then a majority of those present can pass the action. That's different from the nonprofit code, because take it as an example. Let's say you have a 5-member board, and at a regular board meeting, 3 people show up. That's a majority. So 3 directors show up, and theoretically then 2 of those directors can pass that decision. Different from the nonprofit code, because it's the majority of the directors in office if they were all voting. So if you have a 5-member board, then 3 is a majority of that board. So 3 have to respond with a vote in favor by the deadline that you've put in your email. So big distinction, and a lot of boards aren't following that. So just keep that in mind. Also, the other thing about the board action by email is that any director or directors can, by the deadline date, respond with a demand for a physical board meeting. So anyone can say, no, I don't want to do this. I want to meet in person, which means either in person or through virtual meeting to make this decision. So if anybody responds within the deadline date, then you can no longer have that vote by email. So I know that I went over that quickly, but there's a lot of stuff on our website and our blogs that discusses this in more detail. So just consult the blog. Can we vote by mail? Yes, you can. Again, this is under the nonprofit code. And essentially it says, unless otherwise provided by the bylaws, the homeowners can, take action by mail. It's by written ballot is what it's called. So you have to state a lot of things that you have to follow the nonprofit code in terms of what you put in those written ballots, things like quorum that's required, that would have been required at the meeting, deadline, date and time by when you have to respond to the ballot. The ballot has to actually say whether you can vote for or against the item that's proposed. So you can't just have a ballot that says vote for something. There's a lot of little nuances per the statute. Again, I'm not going to go into great detail with that. I just know that it's available, and follow the nuances. Have your attorney review what you prepared, or have your attorney draft it yourself, because if you miss one of these technical compliance issues with the nonprofit code, then that's going to raise an argument that the entire vote is invalid. So just consult your attorney with that. One thing I wanted to say about the exception here, it says any exceptions, is the budget ratification. So Kiowa says, as most of you know and have already been doing the budget ratification process, Kiowa says it requires a meeting at which the owners are to consider the budget and then vote for the ratification. So considering the budget, you can't really consider the budget by mail. So that's one of the potentially technical exceptions to acting by mail. You might be able to argue a hybrid issue where you have the discussion online and then you conduct the mail ballot, just like you did with the secret ballots for the contested elections. But it is something that is, an issue. So again, you can vote by mail. The one exception is probably the budget ratification. So tip number 3, be prepared for technological challenges. You really need to be familiar with whatever platform you're using. Schedule and send out invitations to homeowners way ahead of time with very clear instructions of how to check in, how proxies are handled, how to name themselves on the meeting itself so you can verify who's actually at the meeting, because you're going to have to check in everybody and verify that they're actually the right people attending the meeting. Test the equipment way ahead of time, have a run through, make sure that there's somebody that's familiar with the technology so they can help moderate and deal with any IT issues that come up. We did a blog just recently that was post-pandemic playbooks. It's one of the most recent blogs. Please check that out, because that does have a lot of specific recommendations in terms of virtual meetings and what you should be doing for your playbook for meetings. And remember, clean your desktop. If you're going to share the desktop, don't have a bunch of stuff on your desktop, and don't pick up your laptop and move to another room. That's really distracting, and you might forget where you're at. If you guys have seen that lovely video where somebody accidentally went to the bathroom, you don't want that to happen. That's not a good thing. So, all right, so be prepared. We already talked about that. Enforcement. So we're shifting now to enforcement. So enforcement FAQs. Maybe this is no longer an issue, but I just still want to go over some of these questions. Yes, there is a duty to enforce. Just because COVID happened doesn't mean that your duty disappeared. It's still in place. The covenants and rules and regulations are still in place to protect the association. However, right now, maybe there's some kind of covenants that might have more priority or enforcement priority than others. Or maybe today there's the way you carry out enforcement might mean something different, which we'll kind of discuss in these next questions. Are there specific, or can we decide not to enforce specific violations? So no, you shouldn't be making a decision not to enforce a particular violation, but perhaps the compliance is delayed. I mean, you do have to respond to the fact that there's a safer at home order and there's social distancing protocols that are in place that might inhibit your ability to enforce. So maybe failure to keep the yard weed free, that might be less of a priority. Or let's say a parking violation where you're not supposed to have a certain number of vehicles in the community, but the only way that people can stay with the safer at home orders and work, be at home, is to bring their vehicle home. So, there's certain things where you have to address and let certain things go and just recognize that this might not have as much priority as the other things. Are there specific violations we must enforce regardless of COVID-19? I would say yes. Any type of violation that, if not enforced, would result in injury to or damage to person or property. So things like maintenance repair violations, you don't want to ignore the leaky unit. You don't want to address the situations where there's some kind of damage or something that's actually going to be injurious to a person, and don't ignore it because you're thinking, oh, I don't have to enforce it because of COVID. Yes, you do. Or, given everyone is home during the lockdown or the safer at home order, everybody's on top of each other. And, there's a lot of nuisance type violations, neighbor noise violations that are more prevalent and therefore should be addressed. Things like this, the noise issues and everything, they tend to escalate quickly. People are fighting more. You don't want to let this become some kind of violent situation. So you need to stay on top of those types of violations. If there's language in your docs or your policy, your enforcement policy that allows you to escalate things, skip certain things, make sure that if you don't have that in there, make sure your policy does have that in there. You might want to push things to the attorney quicker, or have quicker hearings, or deviate from the specific requirements. Also, enforcement of any type of violation that places someone in danger of being exposed to the virus or violating the order, which we'll talk about, would be problematic as well. But then, even then, you might still have a duty to enforce or otherwise comply with your own obligations of the governing documents. For example, in a condo building, if there's a flood in a unit, you can't ignore that flood by saying, I don't want to go into that unit because I'm afraid of being exposed to the virus. And I know there's fear of exposure, and maybe your contractor is even afraid of being exposed, or the contractor, you're afraid of being exposed by the contractor and getting the virus. You still have the duty to make those emergency repairs, but you need to think about it on a case-by-case basis. Maybe you argue the homeowners are in another room. You could probably submit them to temperatures to make sure that the contractor doesn't have any exposure. I mean, there's things that you can do. Talk to your attorney about these. What if the city and county is allowing something that we prohibit? And the thing that came up was the parking, the RVs. I remember when people were trying to comply with the quarantine orders, they were they were living in those RVs. And maybe there's something in there that says, no RVs in the community, or you can't use it as temporary housing. This is exactly the type of thing where you do want to be reactive to COVID-19 and the fact that there's an order out there that requires them to quarantine. You want to relax that kind of covenant. And remember, just think the quarantine period, it maybe is only 14 days, so it's only a temporary issue. So just realize that as well. Do we need to change our enforcement protocol? Again, it's more about leniency, and depending on the type of violation, you might relax it a little or not require compliance until after some of the restrictions are lifted or after they're able to comply while still complying with the social distancing protocols and everything under the order. And also with respect to enforcement protocol, remember, I mean, before you levy a fine, you have to give an opportunity for a hearing. You need to be familiar again with the meeting protocols and allow those hearings virtually or some kind of hybrid. Maybe you have some that aren't comfortable, maybe they call in. I know that there's an issue with maybe hearing things, but you need to be flexible in terms of holding that hearing, and you need to be knowledgeable about your virtual meeting platform so you can go through that hearing quickly. So re-examine your covenants, your rules and regulations. We'll talk about some of the things in the post-pandemic world and what you should be considering later on the slides. Okay, let's talk about financial considerations. This is a big one. So what's our general duty to collect? You have a duty to collect. I mean, that's inherent in an association, that you need to collect assessments to be able to pay the bills, to address the expenses. Assessments are the lifeblood of the association, so you need to remember that. And it's really easy for boards to forget that. And it's, the association model is not the right model for you to stop assessments or stop collecting because you are reacting short term to a number of people who have financial difficulties. It's as hard as it seems. I mean, there's things that you can do about that, but you shouldn't be acting in the best interest of a certain group of people. You should be acting in the best interest of the corporation. So can we suspend the levying of assessments? Most likely, no. Most documents say that you have to collect assessments, you have to levy them, and some of them say at a particular time you have to levy them. So if you don't levy the assessments, and that means actually imposing them, not collecting them, impose them, then you're probably violating your governing documents. So look to your governing documents, discuss with your attorney on that. Should we stop collection altogether? While it might be tempting again to suspend collections for a period of time to help people catch up, again, you're a fiduciary to the association, act in the best interest of the association, and it's not in the best interest to stop collecting. So don't stop collections, but be mindful that some people might need help, and you need to provide appropriate methods of helping them instead of just stopping collections altogether. Same with the foreclosure process as well. I mean, the same kind of issue. While there may be some states that have halted the foreclosure process, or they're required to, and I know the banks are required to at this point, but associations are not required to halt the foreclosure process, but you do have to be mindful and ready to address potential hardships. Can we take, and we'll talk about appropriate methods here in a second, can we take from the reserves? I'd say no. I don't think you should. Now, I realize that you may, if you're overfunded, yeah, maybe that's a great resource. I just kind of push back to the whole reserve issue, because if you're taking from Peter to pay Paul, then who's going to pay Peter later? And you might have all these expenses that are earmarked. That's what the reserves are for. And all of a sudden, you're not going to have that money to be able to pay those expenses. And you just need to, again, act in the best interests of the association. If I would say speak to your attorney about that. If you are going to take from reserves to address an expense, so that you can, and you're taking from the operating account to address this particular, the reserve account to address a particular expense, because you are allowing delays in collection, and all of these are moving parts, talk to your attorney again, because you're going to be talking about, you're going to want to be quick in terms of paying back that reserve as quickly as possible. And again, I'm not talking about the association that has a ton of reserves that are fully funded in their reserves. That's probably pretty rare for a lot of associations. But if you are a post-Kiowa community, which is a community that was formed after July 1st, 1992, then Kiowa actually says you're supposed to refund if you have a surplus of reserves. You're supposed to credit or refund to the homeowners unless your declaration specifies otherwise. So that's another discussion for another topic, but just recognize that. So what are some of the appropriate ways to assist? Some reasonable options might be to waive late fees or interest. That might not be doing much, but it is something that you can do. Provide longer payment plans. That might be very helpful for those who are out of work but might come back to work, but you just want to stretch out the payments for a longer period of time than you would normally do that. Maybe you are delaying the files being turned over to the attorney, again, to give them a little bit more time. But the association, again, has a duty to collect. And if you're going to do any kind of moratoriums, it would be good to document this. Maybe you revise your collection policy or enter into some kind of moratorium resolution to say what you're doing, and this protects you in the future in case somebody says, why are you doing this differently? That's not what the collection policy says. Well, what we're trying to do is respond to COVID and still act in the best interest of the association, but be mindful of people who need help. So, oops, I went back, sorry. So tip 5, make a reasoned decision. That's what it all comes down to. Don't look at just today's financial circumstances. Make a decision according to both today's financial circumstances and also tomorrow's financial health. That's what I was trying to say. So ultimately, remember the business judgment rule. A court is going to look at your decisions and ask this question: did you act in good faith, prudently, and in the best interest of the association? And if you have documented that you did, you've asked a lot of questions, you consider all the circumstances, you will be protected as a board member. All right, so let's keep on. I think we're getting through this with some pretty good time here. Okay, so let's talk now. Let's shift again to FAQs regarding lockdown and safer at home orders. I mean, now we are in a safer at home order, but I did want to talk a little bit about the lockdown order as well, because a lot of that language is now in the safer at home order and it still applies. So way back in March, if you can believe it, I keep seeing these memes about, okay, you've made it through March. Okay, you've made it through April. Now you've made it through May and you've reached level 6 of Jumanji. We're in a crazy world. So you've made it to level 6 of Jumanji. But in level 1, in March, the governor issued a public health order 2024. And all of these orders, including the old one, are on our website. So the address is at the end of this presentation. But essentially it says stay in your residence. That means you're home. Doesn't mean if you're in a condo association, stay in the condo building. It means where you reside. So stay in your residence, unless you're performing some kind of critical business or you're engaging in some kind of necessary activity. Also, there was things, discussions about no kind of groups outside, no number of groups of people unless, again, necessary activity or performing an essential activity. There's language about those who are experiencing COVID or have been exposed and are infected must self-quarantine. All these things are still in the order, so I'm just mentioning them again. Travel was limited except for necessary travel. It was definitions of critical businesses, lots of ambiguous terms. So what's my scope of duty as an association under this lockdown order, in addition to the safer at home order, which we'll talk about a little bit of the differences. So your duty as a board member doesn't change just because of a lockdown or safer at home order. Your duty, go back to the slides where I said your duty is to act as a reasonable board member, to act in the best interest of the association and prudently in your role as a board member. You are still required to maintain the common elements. That might change in terms of what you do to maintain those common elements. Again, a heightened duty of cleaning. You are not all of a sudden the enforcement cop of the state or local order. You enforce your own regulations. And you just really need to remember that, because I think I see boards saying, oh, well, the order says this, so this is what we're going to do, but they go outside of the jurisdiction of their role as board members. You are not the enforcer of the state or local ordinance. How do local ordinances impact this? So again, know what your scope of duty is and make sure you talk to your attorney if you don't know what that is. How do local ordinances impact this? Some local ordinances are stricter than the state. So look at the state order and look at the local order. So the lockdown, like the safer at home order, the one that just got updated yesterday, it's in place until June 1st now. Some counties might say, you know what, we're extending ours till July 15th. So you need to look at the local ordinance to see if it's stricter or if it's less strict based on variance approval. One of the questions that comes up is, what if the order conflicts with the CDC? So the CDC are not mandates or requirements for your association. These are guidelines and recommendations. You have to comply with your state and local orders and your governing documents. So if the CDC recommendation differs from a state order, follow the state order. Don't follow, but if the state order is silent, then you can certainly look at the CDC recommendations in order to make your informed decision. Go back to the slide in the beginning again when I talked about the business judgment rule and relying on experts. One of those experts is the CDC that you can use to make an informed decision. Does the association have the right to enforce state lockdown order? I said no already. There is nothing in the order that says you, association, have the right to directly enforce the lockdown order. Rather, you have the right to enforce your own regulations, and then you can use the order as guidance in terms of you enforcing your own regulations. What if the language is ambiguous? What's necessary? What's critical? What's essential? If the orders, whether state or local, are ambiguous, then you have the right as a board to adopt reasonable interpretations with respect to enforcing your own governing documents. And this is something that is allowed, again, to boards. You know as well as I that there's a lot of ambiguous language in your governing documents. So what do you do then? You have the authority to adopt reasonable interpretations, things like household pet or commercial vehicles. What does that mean? The board can adopt a reasonable interpretation and act on that. And again, as long as it's reasonable, then it will be protected under the business judgment rule, and you made that decision informed and in the best interest of the association. All right, tip number 6, communicate often. What should I be communicating to the homeowners? You know, as board members and managers and anybody in the industry, you know, you need to communicate often and well. I mean, let them know what you're doing, as people want to know that you're taking this seriously. I know that you're probably already doing this, but for those of you who are still not sort of in the whole COVID world and not doing much in terms of your association, you should start doing things now. Articulate what you're going to do, whether it's closing or keeping the swimming pool closed, or whether it's, hey, this is what we did with respect to the common elements. We cleaned them down. Here's our protocol. Or whether it's new rules that you're going to adopt in order to move forward post-pandemic or currently during the pandemic. Communicate. Let them know you've done all this, and just make sure you do this on an ongoing basis. What happens if someone has COVID? Should we let everyone know? No. I mean, I don't think that you should be asking people to self-report in general. It implies that the board or the management company is going to be monitoring, you know, the self-quarantine compliance. But if people have self-reported, you shouldn't be disclosing this to everybody. I mean, you can circulate a general letter to the community saying, hey, it's come to our attention that there is somebody affected with COVID, and then to direct them again to the CDC or whatever other local authorities, health authorities, that say, here's what you should do to keep yourself safe and healthy. Because again, you as an association do not have a duty to keep people safe and healthy. That's their own duty. You can take as many precautions as you like. People can still be sick. So don't. I was talking to one of the management company owners, and he had said, I mean, this is a great comment. Be careful of your language. Don't use terms like "we will keep you safe." Just like if you have a camera that's there to catch violations, don't call it a security camera. We're not providing for your security. We're not keeping you healthy, and we're not keeping you safe. What we're doing is we are maintaining the governing documents to provide that what's necessary and what's reasonable under the circumstances to comply with the order. So if somebody is affected, though, you can certainly provide that information to the local authorities and let them deal with how they want to communicate that to your community or anyone else. Should we require a person exposed, infected with COVID-19 to quarantine? I mean, yes, you should certainly point them to the decisions or to the order that says that they should self-quarantine. But don't take that additional step. Don't exceed your lane. You are not there to monitor whether they have complied with the self-quarantine orders. Don't station somebody in front of their door to make sure that they haven't left for 14 days. I heard someone doing that in association, and so don't do that. That's not your role. That exceeds your role. Do I have a heightened duty to clean? Yes, you have a duty to maintain. And remember, the duty to clean is going to be heightened, but doesn't mean that you could clean something for 24/7. It doesn't mean that somebody is not still going to be infected. You do what's reasonable under the circumstances, and you know, that does mean, you know, heightened types of cleaning mechanisms. How do I monitor and enforce compliance of closed amenities? So let's say you have a closed playground. How are you going to do that? There's no gate around it. So you do have the obligation to enforce violations. So if you have adopted as a rule and regulation that facility is closed, the playground facility, then you do have a duty to enforce that. If for known violations, you should certainly post the order and post something, tape saying this facility is closed. But that doesn't mean you have to have somebody stationed there 24/7 to make sure that nobody is using the playground facilities. That's probably unreasonable. And it's not the same thing as pools, which we'll talk about in a second. But definitely, you know, post the signs, post the order with respect to the internal amenities and things that you can actually lock them, post the rules, post the order. And if somebody brings to your attention that there is a violation, then you certainly need to enforce it. And again, we'll talk about pools here in a second. Oh, so this next one, do we have to refund for non-use of amenities? That is something that's come up quite a bit. And I'm going to say no. I know that I had this in another question, I think, coming up, but no. I mean, so you're trying to comply with the order. You're trying to protect the best interests of the association. You've decided to close the facilities because of COVID and because maybe the mechanisms for you to keep them open, it's not feasible for you. That doesn't mean the expenses go away. So if somebody's saying refund my assessments, well, the assessments are not just used to maintain those common elements. They're used for a variety of things. The assessments are the lifeblood of the association. So you ought to be considering that. I mean, you could close a pool because of you're replacing it or maintaining it for some other reason other than COVID. Did we get the question for a refund of assessments at that point? No, we didn't get it. It's just because it's COVID right now. And everybody thinks, well, I should get a refund. No, you shouldn't. I mean, the association has to move forward, pay the expenses. And there's even an argument that there might actually be increased expenses because of COVID, maybe increased cleaning protocol, maybe increased administrative expenses to address all the COVID situations. So when you get asked that question, say no, because you have a duty to act in the best interest of the association and to pay expenses, and COVID doesn't change that. Do I have to allow use of amenities as a reasonable accommodation under FHA? That was a question before, but no, the accommodation has to be reasonable. And, you're trying to comply with the order, so it's not reasonable to say violate the order in order to allow this accommodation. But speak to your attorney because it depends on a lot of things. Can I require people to wear masks? You have the right to regulate common elements, so that could include requiring masks when they're on the common elements. That's up to you. Maybe it makes sense in one type of community where you're really packed in. Maybe it's a high-rise condo and there's a lot more opportunity for people to get infected versus a single-family home community with acreage where it doesn't really make as much sense. But that's up to you to regulate the common elements. And if you do require people to wear masks, then you can enforce it like any other violation. Should I be taking temperatures everyone coming in the building? So I would say in general, again, I think it depends on the circumstances of the building. Probably in one situation you might be able to do that. I don't see any authority that directly allows you to do that. But again, you have rule and regulation authority, and maybe it's another extra layer of precaution for those really tight, close amenity or buildings, or maybe a high-risk community where people are going to, there's a lot of traffic. Maybe it makes sense to do that, but I mean, it's just an extra layer of precaution. It's not something that the order says you must do or shall do. Can we move forward with construction projects? I mean, I think people have already made up their minds about whether to do that, but things that you need to remember, because if it's a critical business, which the order does say that construction companies are critical businesses, that you need to make sure that you're thinking about this, maintaining the social distancing protocols, and you need to be thinking about things like, is this a project that we can safely defer till next year? If no, then you should be allowing those construction projects. So for example, the big one is the leaky roof, the roof replacement, or the residing, or something that if you don't do now will result in injury potentially, or damage to the common elements, or increased mold, or whatever. So that's a roof replacement project versus the decision to beautify the landscaping monument area. I mean, that probably could be deferred till next year, and maybe you should defer it. So you have to be thinking about all these things, all the circumstances of the community, the type of construction project, whether it can be safely deferred, whether if you don't do it, it's going to cause additional damages or injury. I mean, all of that, it goes into making an informed decision as a board, which again will protect you. If somebody challenges your decision, you can say, look, I asked all these questions and I came to the conclusion that the construction project was necessary or not necessary. Do we need to ensure contractors maintain social distancing protocol? I mean, I think that the contractor needs to do that and needs to represent that to you. So the construction company should be telling you, yes, we can do this by maintaining social distancing protocols. Yes, we can complete this project. Yes, we're going to comply with all the orders and all the guidelines and everything that are in place. It's not you that's telling them that they're critical. It's them that's telling you that they are a critical business and can perform the project according to the protocols. Can we change the contract if we decide not to move forward with the project? Look to your contract. Talk to your attorney, because there's probably provisions, there might be provisions in there. There's one called the force majeure, and there's impossibility clauses and act of God clauses. Talk to your attorney, because those are the things that say, essentially, if the project is impossible, then we can't comply with the contract, so we need to renegotiate or breach or whatever. Talk to your attorney definitely about that. Can I deny access to Airbnbers, contractors, realtors and everything? And now we're talking about projects and actions of the homeowner. So just as a general response, if you didn't have the ability to do this before, you don't have really the ability to do this now. So Airbnbers, if there's nothing that says no short-term rentals are allowed or no Airbnbs are prohibited, you can't all of a sudden say, oh, we're going to stop Airbnb because of COVID. So again, that's exceeding your role. You don't get emergency restrictions in your governing documents that you can enforce just because of COVID. It's up to the homeowner to decide how to comply with their regulations. I will say that the limited circumstance, again, depends on the community. I'm going to go back to that high rise or even the high risk associations like 55 and over. There could be these special circumstances when you actually have the ability to control access, like there's security to the door, or you might have language in their documents, or even if you don't, to deny non-essential people that you think are non-essential because of the quick ease that the infection could spread within the high traffic area. So that's a very, very limited circumstance. And again, I would talk to the attorney, and even if you were able to secure, to deny access, how are you going to monitor that? Homeowners can just give the key access or the fob or the key code to that building. And another point I want to make, you don't want to get into fist fights over these things. If somebody is not complying with a particular rule or regulation, yes, you want to enforce it. Yes, you want to employ your remedies, but that could be something like fining or suspending somebody from using amenities. But don't get violent over this. I've had some boards that they're really, I understand the need and want to ensure that orders are complied with, but contact the cops if they're not, or the local health authority if they're not complying with the state or local orders. Take down their name, figure out who they are, and then enforce it through your fines. Talk to your attorney about other different ways that you can enforce it, but don't get into any kind of fistfights over this. Oh, and that's tip number 7, consult with your attorney if you are unsure of your role of authority. Those last 2 questions about realtors and someone trying to move in and move out of the building, there is specific language in the Safer at Home orders that does state that you should allow people to move in and out of the building, even during COVID. That's one of those necessary activities. And I believe, I'm not sure about the realtors, I know that they make some changes, but I believe the open houses are not allowed, but the on-site one-on-one showings of the homes are okay under the Safer at Home orders. There was a new order that came out last night, so I haven't read for that particular situation, but just review it and search for the term realtors or move in and move out. So tip number 7, consult your attorney if you're unsure of your role and unsure of the order. So let's talk about Safer at Home orders. And so right now that public health order is 2028, and all of these orders again on our website, and they're highlighted in the sort of this gold orange color so you can get to them really quickly. But this order has been amended 4 times now. So the 4th one came in last night. So it's lifted some of the things, and this new order is effective until June 1st, unless amended and rescinded or changed. And what we'll talk about pools in general in the next slide, but let's talk about just the general differences. So before, in the lockdown order, public gatherings of any size and number were prohibited. Today, same as the last Safer at Home order, gatherings of more than 10 are prohibited. And then again, you have to have the same social distancing protocols of 6 feet between people. Before, you could leave your residences for necessary activities or to perform or take advantage of the critical businesses. And the way necessary activities was defined was to include outdoor activities such as, by way of example, I'm just going to read this to you, walking, hiking, Nordic skiing, snowshoeing, biking, or running. For purposes of outdoor activities, state parks will remain open to the public who live in the vicinity to engage in walking, hiking, biking, running, and similar outdoor activities, but all playgrounds, picnic areas, and other similar areas conducive to public gathering and attended areas shall be closed. That was before. So today, the only change there is there's a couple things. One, specifically allows camping. So you can see where the priorities in Colorado are. I know in one state, an essential activity was, I think, wrestling or something. And so whatever priority is there. So camping is allowed. Also, basketball and tennis courts are now permitted to be open for use by individuals or members of the same household only. And again, we're going to talk about polls in the next slide. So that's what today's order says in terms of the necessary activity. The language about conducive to public gathering and attended areas is still the same. So any kind of areas that are conducive to public gathering and attended areas shall still be closed. One thing that you should note is, although the order doesn't say this, the FAQs that are on the Colorado Department of Health and Environment website, there's FAQs, and they clarify the order. And one of the FAQs says quite plainly, and this is the only area where it just very clearly says HOAs, are swimming pools allowed to be open, indoor or outdoor public pools, HOA and apartment pools, and gym pools? And in that section of the FAQ, it says no. And as far as I know, that still hasn't changed. So again, we'll talk about pools here in a second in the next slide specifically. So that's really, I mean, there's other things in the order, but when you're thinking about just what's changed in terms of the necessary outdoor activities, remember that basketball, tennis, camping, there's a whole new section on camping, as well as a whole new appendix on camping. That's all addressed in the Safer at Home order that came out last night. So should we reopen amenities in general? How do we make this decision? The most critical decision in evaluating whether an association should reopen its facilities is to make sure the board makes an informed decision. Again, each association is different. Each association has different amenities and different traffic, and maybe it's a high-risk association or a condo, a high-rise condo that's secured and a lot of traffic. Maybe there's amenities that are never used, or there's so few people that it doesn't matter if everybody uses them at the same time. Maybe there's less than 10 units. All of this is instrumental in making your informed decision. And each association different, and each board needs to make a decision based in the general, in the best interest of the association. So in making this decision, look at the state and local orders. We already talked about that. Look at whatever health information is available, like the CDC recommendations. If it's a particular amenity, tennis courts, there's a great, the U.S. Tennis Association provided some really good recommendations and tips for both players of tennis, as well as those entities that are maintaining and controlling the tennis amenities, the court amenities. So definitely look at that. I think the U.S. Swimming Association did the same thing. You should be talking to your vendors and seeing what they discussed. Talk to your attorneys. There's a lot of things that you can do to make an informed decision. Just make sure that it's informed and you've documented all these questions that you've asked. Does the state's loosening of order minimize or absolve liability? No. It really doesn't. It actually, what the state does and decides to do, it's what the state does and decides to do. It doesn't have any regulation, have any bearing on you as a board or your liability for opening or shutting or keeping the amenities closed. You make that decision based on the circumstances, based on your association, based on making an informed decision, and liability will be minimized or eliminated if you act according to the prior standard, the business judgment rule. Good faith, prudently, and in the best interest of the association. Can we keep some closed and others open? Absolutely, depending on the types of the amenities. You should definitely, I mean, you don't want to close, you might want to continue to close the pool, which we'll talk about, but you don't want to close maybe the library, because it's the type of thing that there's not a lot of traffic there and you barely see anybody in there. So depending on the amenity, I don't think you should rush out and open all the amenities if the safer at home order loosens your restrictions. You should make a decision based on each of those amenities and whether it's feasible to keep those amenities open. So that really leads to the next thing. Do we need to monitor social distancing protocol? Yes. And so you need to make sure that the type of amenity, I don't think you need to have somebody stationed 24/7 in front of the playground. If there's some kind of, when I say monitor, just make sure that you're doing some checks. And again, the pool is different. Where there's a lot of traffic, that's different. We'll talk about specifics there. But you should have some kind of mechanisms that allow you to know that people are complying with the order. And you should know what those specific requirements are. Again, the 6 feet between people, no more than 10 people gathering. Some associations have hired extra staff for certain amenities. Some associations have installed cameras. I mean, there's things that you can do to monitor social distancing protocol. But again, what you're doing is making a reasonable decision under the circumstances. I think that it's really going to depend on the association. It's really going to depend on the type of association and considering the feasibility of what you need to do to ensure that the social distancing compliance factors are met, and how much frequent disinfection of the equipment you're going to have to do. What is the ability of the resident to use that particular amenity in a safe manner? What type of amenity and how much traffic? I mean, all of these, considering all these factors, make a decision, and it could be the decision is it's not feasible to open because we can't do all that. It's okay if you make that decision. Remember, the business judgment rule will protect you. I had a mantra that I had in another blog where I said, it's sort of OJ-esque. If you don't have the ability, then don't open the facility. So remember that. If you don't have the ability, then don't open the facility, and make sure that if you do open it, you're going to be able to maintain those social distancing protocols and do everything necessary to be reasonable and respond to the orders of the social distancing order compliance, and to act reasonably according to your common elements and maintaining them in an appropriate manner. Okay, so let's talk about pools. Should we reopen the pool? So first, again, look to your state order and the local order. And here's what Colorado says now under the new safer at home order. If you look at section 1H, there's a general exception that was already in place that says that allows, that says it's an exception for staying indoors to participate in personal recreation, in personal recreation in outside public spaces. That's still there, and it says outside public spaces. So that's been the key thing when people are trying to review that. Well, it says public, doesn't really say private, but again, the FAQ, which hasn't changed, does say HOAs, and it does say in response to the question, should we keep our pools open? It says no. I mean, just unequivocally no. That hasn't changed as far as I know since noon today when I was looking it up again. So what section on 1H said before was, again, with the general exception from staying indoors, is to participate in personal recreation in outside public spaces. Previously, it said playgrounds, playground equipment, pools, amusement parks, and arcades remain closed. Personal training and classes in any setting are limited to all members of a single household or a mixed group of 4 or fewer individuals complying with social distancing protocols. Today's order was changed slightly, still the same language about the outside public spaces, but now it says playgrounds, playground equipment, pools except for you. Oh, here's the change. Pools except for use for personal training shall remain closed. Personal training and classes in indoor settings are limited to all members of a single household or a mixed group of 4 or fewer individuals, same language as before. So what it makes it clear is that pools remain closed except for personal training, and if that personal training is an indoor setting versus any setting versus the prior language, which is any setting, then all members must be at a single household or a mixed group of 4 or fewer individuals. Again, we're talking about, it addresses in the beginning public pools or public outdoor spaces. And now the exception is really personal training in an indoor spaces. So it doesn't talk about personal training on outdoor spaces, and it doesn't talk about personal training with respect to private spaces. So it doesn't really address any of that in the order. But again, look at the FAQ. The FAQ has not changed. Should we keep pools open, whether it's a homeowners association pool or not? FAQs still say no. And the language about places conducive to public gatherings shall remain closed, that hasn't changed as well. So even though the order doesn't address it specifically, the FAQ does, and you can certainly rely on both in making your decision as to whether or not you want to open your pool or not. We're saying still keep your pool closed until the order is amended, until June 1st. Again, there's those limited exceptions, and if you have more questions about that, you can contact me offline, but let's move on. So how do we make the decision? According to what we just said, look at the state and local orders, see if the local order is more restrictive, look at your association, think about things that you're going to have to do to monitor and enforce the restrictions. Pitfalls of opening, and I'll talk about specifics here if you decide to open the pool. How do we make this decision? We talked about that. What are the pitfalls of opening too early? Well, infection, same pitfalls as before. What if the governor has been very clear that he will close lockdown again if there's a second wave? So what if you open it, then you have to close it again? Why not wait a little bit longer and allow it to be open then, instead of risking that fact? Maybe the another pitfall is all the lawsuits or something that could come. It's just better to adhere to that order which says don't open the pools yet until we say something else gets clarified and allows you to open it as an HOA. If we reopen, do we need to monitor social distancing? Yes, and we'll talk about those things, because that is very different from monitoring other kinds of rules and regs at a pool. So you could have a rule and reg that says no alcohol at the pool or no running around the pool. You don't need somebody there 24/7 to monitor somebody running around the pool. But that doesn't really lead to the same kind of potential liability as allowing anybody to come in and just putting a gate or a sign on the gate that says, okay, so maintain social distancing, we're all good. That's not good. Because it could lead to everybody coming in and regardless of whether they're infected or they've been exposed. And if the order says this or implies this, then you definitely need to have the feasibility to open it and to do things. So let's talk about what we should be doing. Make residents sign a waiver. Definitely. I think that doesn't absolve your liability. It's just an extra layer of precaution. It's letting people know that, you're assuming the risk. You are acknowledging the fact that the order still says that it should be closed, or even if it does open, you're acknowledging the fact that people could get infected anyway. So you want people to sign the waivers as an extra layer of precaution. What's your disinfection plan? You need to, what are you going to do about the furniture? Are you going to keep all the furniture? Are you going to get rid of all the furniture? If you keep all the furniture, are you going to wipe down the lounges and the chairs regularly? If you have staff and employees, do they have a policy or protocol for regularly washing their hands and otherwise complying with social distancing protocols? What's your plans about the bathrooms? What about the restrooms? Are you going to consider closing them? We haven't found anything that says you can't close them. If you're going to keep them open, how often are you going to clean and disinfect them? Are you going to require people to wear masks? Put a registration in place. What if you decide, okay, we're going to open it at a certain capacity, so we want to be able to control the number of people that are in the pool at the same time. And so the best way to do that is to have a registration system, have people sign up so they don't get upset that they show up and you turn them away. Have that system in place. Maybe you have different hours. Like this particular group gets to be there between 10 and 11. This particular group gets to be there at a certain time. So that's something that you can certainly do. Have your attorney review and assist with any kind of rules and regulations. Revise your rules and regulations to address this. Revise your signage to address this. And say that there are rules and regulations in place. Discuss with your pool vendor what are some of the requirements and recommendations that they have. Make sure that you comply with that. And just be ready to tweak whatever those regulations are if and when the order is changed, or any local orders, again, are changed, so you could make sure that you're in compliance with the most recent order. So there's a blog on this that discusses post-pandemic protocol again, and it discusses it in terms of pools. So please consult with that. Let me just move on so I can get to some of these questions. So FAQs, how to move forward. What should we be thinking about? So meeting protocol, let me just get to this real quick. Meeting protocol, digital engagement is, which is any conversation online, is, I think, something that is here to stay. I think it's one of the effects of COVID-19 that's likely to stay, and in my opinion, it's probably a good reason that's staying, because we always talk about apathy in meetings, in annual meetings, and with that apathy, with the online meetings and the virtual meetings, there's greater participation, which I've heard, from everyone. And with some, it's their preferred method of communication and participating in things. So you might want to consider changing your, well, first of all, your bylaws. If your bylaws prohibit any kind of telecommunication or online virtual meetings, you want to get rid of that. You want to amend your conduct of meetings policy, like we discussed a second ago, with respect to, the protocols, the additional protocols that need to be put in place. Maybe another thing that you want to clarify, just some of the additional procedures that are going to be in place because of virtual meetings. And like with the board meetings that are actually acting, board members that are acting outside of a meeting, you want to look at your bylaws again to get rid of that unanimous approval language and allow them to act according to the statute instead, or some other protocol. So change your governing documents. We talked about maybe bylaws. Clarify the ability to act outside of a meeting, to conduct virtual meetings. Again, the conduct of meetings policy should include specific protocol for virtual meetings. One thing that some of the articles of incorporation say that the purpose of the association is to advance the health and safety of residents. Maybe you want to get rid of that language and say advance the welfare, and just be done with the argument that, hey, you have a duty to keep me safe and healthy. With COVID-19, you hear about all these companies that are transitioning to completely working at home. So what does that mean about your home business and conducting business at home? Maybe half the population now will be, maybe not that many, but you might want to address that as well and be more flexible in terms of what kind of home businesses can be conducted at home without any negative impact to the exterior. Do we need to change our collections protocol? Again, associations need assessments, but you need to be mindful of people who need extra time to catch up because they've lost a job or they've been infected with COVID. So definitely adopt the moratorium we talked about in terms of what are the things that you're willing to do to be mindful of the waiver of the late fees, the interest, the longer payment plans, those kinds of things. Should we consider adjusting our budgets? Talk about what things can be safely deferred. Do we need to get rid of some of those projects that we were discussing? Do we need to think about reserves and how we're going to use those? Do we need to think about special assessments? Do we need a loan? I mean, all of these things for the remaining projects for the remainder of the year, you just need to look at the budget and see if it's really makes sense during COVID. Do we need to review our contracts? Again, talk to your attorney about those clauses that need to be put in there in order to allow you to either renegotiate a contract because of impossibility. Just have those safe provisions in your contracts to address it. Do we need to rethink our amenities? Everything that we talked about in terms of opening amenities again, furniture protocol, sanitizers, hand sanitizers, wiping down and enhanced cleaning protocols. All of those things should be addressed in any kind of amenities. I know I talked about pools, but really you should be thinking about all the different types of amenities. And tip number 9, check our website. We have a section just called COVID-19 resources, where I've been speaking really quickly, I know, but we talk about all these things in detail. So just make sure that you look at that and you're always on the lookout of new things that we are doing, and provide new webinars, new Zoom sessions, new articles and blogs that talk about these specific things in detail so you can get even more recommendations. Tip number 10, remember your sense of community. The only thing I wanted to say there was, you know, I mean, I know that you have a role as a board member or a manager in terms of enforcing your governing documents and all that, and making sure that you comply with the order. But you know, there are certain things that you can help lift the spirits of those that are in the community. You know, there's board resolutions. I know that some associations, board resolutions authorizing solidarity lighting and suspending architectural guidelines to allow certain types of holiday type things, white electric light candles, allowing the types of parades that go through, encouraging residents to support one another, continuing to communicate and forward important information to everybody, and then obviously be kind. I mean, we did see certain things happen with some associations where, you know, unfortunately, those that were infected or exposed, they were actually being harassed against and treated, discriminated against. And so, you know, if you see any kind of harassment because of that issue, then you need to talk to your attorney right away, because that should not be a problem and it should be enforced right away. All right, so I know it says just 4 minutes, but I'll try to get all these questions done. Let's go ahead and maybe some of these I'll start from the beginning. What do we tell people when they want dues lowered because of pools and clubhouses are closed? I already talked about that. You know what, one thing I didn't mention, you know, expenses continue. So the expenses that are for maintaining the amenities don't go away just because of COVID-19. There's all these other expenses and maybe enhanced expenses. But I forgot to say this. A lot of the declarations will say in the assessment section that non-use or abandonment or waiver of a use of amenity, that specific it does not allow you to not pay your assessments. So look for that language as well, because that's a common thing that's used for delinquent homeowners. If they go to court, they say, well, I don't like the way the board is doing something. Well, you know, okay, you have mechanisms to address that. Remove the board or get yourself elected on the board, but you still have an independent obligation to pay assessments. Okay, one of our residents is convinced that there's a release that she can sign that would relieve the HOA of any responsibility for her swimming in the community pool, even though City of Denver has not yet given us permission. So waivers can be used, but again, that does not absolve the liability of the association. You can't waive your own negligence. So if you have failed to maintain the common elements or done things that we all addressed to react to the order and to address the social distancing order and compliance and all that, a waiver is not going to waive your negligence. And so the waiver is just an extra layer of precaution that we do recommend. It's just not the end all be all of everything. Just like whatever you do is not the end all be all of everything. It's just a layer of precaution to show that you were acting in good faith, prudently in the best interest of the association by doing so. So if you need a waiver, talk to your attorney, talk to us. We will definitely prepare one for you. Would it be appropriate to hold a regular board meeting or an annual meeting outside in the common area of the HOA so that owners who could attend would want to attend could maintain social distance? So you can do that. Again, it might be difficult. I had one association that I thought it was a great idea. What he did was he had several rooms that were open, and everybody could actually, you know, they could converge, meeting the social distancing protocol requirements in each of those rooms. And then there was sort of a main room where that's where the speaker was, and it was catapulted out through video, through conference call, whatever, to anybody who wanted to participate. So that way everybody could hear and everybody could see if they wanted to watch it on video or watch it virtually. If you're doing something outside, like by the pool or something, you know, you can do that, but again, you have to make sure, maybe you have a meetings monitor to make sure that everybody is within, you know, outside of that social distancing protocol. And there's still the 10 people. So I don't know how big your association is, but it probably doesn't make sense if you have more than 10 people unless you're using different rooms. For board members, we've been asking homeowners to contact our manager a day in advance with any topics they'd like us to discuss, because the management company's conference call service doesn't have unlimited guests allowed. So we've been limiting to just board members? Do we have to figure out a way to open these conference call virtual meetings to all households? I hate to say this, but yes, anybody, any homeowner and their designated representative can attend a board meeting. So you have to figure it out. If you have 200 or 300 people that want to attend that board meeting, then allow them to attend that board meeting through some virtual programs, which might mean increasing, here's one of those additional expenses you might have to take to increase those expenses to be able to accommodate more people at these meetings. Maybe you stagger the meetings. Maybe you say we're going to have 4 meetings on this topic, and we're only going to allow a certain, it's the same topic, but we're going to stagger them and limit the capacity. So there's ways to do this. I think you should talk to your attorney as well and to your management of the most feasible way to do that. That doesn't cost you an arm and a leg to be able to use a program that allows 300 or 1,000 people in the program. But from what I understand, it's not that expensive. It's like $20 to increase it more from 100 to 300 or something. What we have members who winter in other states or countries and want to vote by email. Is that allowed in Colorado? So you are allowed to respond to a vote by mail using an email mechanism. So if you are voting by written ballot, you have to provide that written ballot, and they can sign it and scan it and email that written ballot to you. So it's not just emailing yes or no to a particular vote. Now that's the annual meeting and the member meeting. I'm not talking about the board meetings, which do allow you to take action outside of a board meeting, and that could be email. With the annual meetings, if you're conducting action by written ballot outside of a meeting, then you have to meet the specific protocol in terms of the ballot and what's included in it. You get that to the homeowner. They respond within the deadline date and time, but that response can be in using any mechanism that makes it easy. And I would encourage you to use as many different types of mechanisms, such as faxing it back if people still fax, scanning and emailing that ballot back, mailing it back, personally delivering it, dropping off, at whatever ballot box that you have. Do you suggest that these annual meetings are actual virtual types of meetings where you can see everyone, or will teleconference only meetings work as well? Yes. So what the statute says is telecommunication. It doesn't talk about everyone seeing each other. It talks about everyone hearing each other. So conference calls are fine, or a hybrid of both virtual and conference calls are fine. So can we mute everyone on Zoom while we conduct the monthly meeting and allow input after the meeting during open forum? Or do we need to allow input on each thing the board discusses at the time it is discussed during the board section of the meeting? Great question. So the statute doesn't say that. So remember I talked about in an early slide where if you're going to have a board meeting, if you're going to take action, which means vote on something, then you have to allow a reasonable number of people to speak that are present to speak for or against or about that action item. It doesn't say when. So you could have everybody sign in and say, if you want to vote on this, tell us, or if you want to speak on this, tell us what you want to speak on, and when you check in, so that you know how many people want to speak about a particular action. And you can have everybody talk about that particular action at the beginning of the meeting or during the homeowner forum. So it's up to you to decide how to do that. So yeah, there's no time frame as long as it's before you vote on the particular action item. If pools are permitted to open and the board wants to just open for lap swimming, how can that be done and keep association in compliance with fair housing, or can it? I mean, I think that that is, something that you need to speak with your attorney when it comes to fair housing issues in terms of, treating families with children differently than other families that don't, or other people that don't have children. So there is definitely a fair housing component there. I think you can still adopt regulations that are meant to comply with the social distancing protocols of the order and say that any kind of accommodation otherwise is not reasonable. So whether it's lap time or age 55 and over communities, they can even actually say no kids in the pool because they're age 55 and over, and so they're exempt for that. But I mean, I think depending on the regulation and how it's worded, and I think depending on the circumstances of the association and the types of amenities they have, whether they have 1 or 2 pools, all those things come into play into whether or not the rule or regulation is reasonable under the circumstances, and asking for something else might not be a reasonable accommodation under the Fair Housing Act. long answer for that one little question, and I hate to say it, it really depends on circumstances, but talk to your attorney specifically about that and the type of community you have, and who's in the community, what kind of amenities you have, how many, and then we'll talk about whether it's reasonable or not. HOA has 120 units. How do we limit the number of owners at our annual meeting to conform to CDC? Well, that's the problem. See, so it's not conforming to the CDC. It's really conforming to the order, to the state order and potential local orders as well. That's why you have to have the virtual meetings or the conference calls, allowing people to participate and be able to maintain social distancing protocols. You can't really do that unless you have this huge meeting room where you can space everybody. And even so, there's still that 10. I haven't gone through the details of the order, but I'm pretty sure that the public gathering still is limited at 10. So I need to review that in detail, and you could probably talk to me offline on that. But like I said, one association was having various rooms so that people can physically participate with no more than 10 in each room, but then opening it up to virtual and conference call as well. Scope of duty. During level 1 and 2, we closed our clubhouse in March, and it's still closed for use because we cannot guarantee it is sanitized after each use. Is this not allowed based on statement that we do not have the right to enforce level 1, 2 orders? Do we have to allow it to be rented, reserved for use, and not worry about the sanitation side of things? Okay, let me make this clear. Maybe I didn't make this clear in the beginning. Although you're not the enforcer of the state order or the local order, you do have the right to regulate the common elements. So you could take the state and local orders and say, we are using that as the basis for adopting regulations to our common elements. So we are choosing to close the swimming pool or to keep the swimming pool closed or close the clubhouse or the gym or whatever based on our regulation authority, which gives us absolute right to close it. So it's not directly affected by the order, other than that the order gives you guidance and allows you to be informed and show that you were informed in making those decisions. So you can keep it closed and just document that we were looking at the order for guidance, and we were looking at CDC guidelines for guidance. And we talked to our attorney, we talked to the local health authorities, we looked at CDC guidelines, all of that stuff. I do not recall you mentioning providing timeframes for the elderly or individuals that are more susceptible to the virus. Do we need to have special times for common area clubhouse? You know, I think I spoke generally about high-risk associations, such as those with the elderly. There's nothing in the order that discusses the specifics of the time frames or regulations or how to maintain those social distancing protocols. So depending on the type of community you have, you need to really either keep the amenity closed because of high risk. I know I read somewhere today that some associations were actually not allowing individuals that are high risk or over a certain age to participate in certain amenities or meetings and everything unless they actually have a signed waiver from their doctor saying that they're okay. Now, I'm not saying that that's what you have to do. I'm just saying that there are people that are trying to be very extreme in responding to this. But you can regulate as long as your regulation is reasonable under the circumstances. It will change depending on the type of community you have, whether it's high risk, whether there's a lot of traffic in those particular amenities. All of these circumstances should be taken into consideration when you're adopting regulations, including timeframes. Okay, there's one here that didn't really. If playground is not staffed, do I need to add staff to clean? Is signage stating use at own risk is sufficient? I think that you should either keep it closed or implement the additional cleaning protocol with things that you're going to open. If you're going to keep the playground closed, and I think the playground is still one of the things that needs to be closed. I'm trying to remember playgrounds and picnic areas. I'm pretty sure those still need to be closed under the order. I would say have a sign up and don't say use at your own risk. Say we're closed. This is closed, and this is closed because of the order. And if you are going to open something because maybe the state has loosened a particular order over a particular amenity, then post what those rules are, post a sign saying you must comply with those rules, have some kind of ongoing inspection of it. I'm not going to tell you that you should hire or have additional staff. All of this is dependent on a lot of things for your circumstances, for your community, what kind of traffic you get, how many people use the amenities, whether this is a popular type of amenity that a lot of people gather in. So all of this is dependent on your circumstances, the association. Consider all those questions that we discussed in the prior slides, and then make a decision and document that you made the decision based on becoming informed. If we have increased expenses to maintain the common elements, can we increase our assessment without going through the budget approval process? So that's document specific, and it's also Kiowa specific, post Kiowa. Actually, so there's exceptions for pre-Kiowa associations. I'm not going to go into that right now, but Kiowa if you are subject to Kiowa, because there's a few associations that are not, but if you are subject to Kiowa, then in order to adopt an amendment to the budget, you still have to go through the same ratification process. So that doesn't mean that you're changing, if you're changing how expenses are going to be used, if you're going to spend more on this particular expense and not that because of COVID, but you're not changing the amount of assessment to the homeowners, then you don't have to ratify a new budget. What we're really talking about is what those changes in the assessments to the homeowners are going to be. In those cases, in the middle of the year, you can amend the budget, but you have to go through the same ratification process. If you're changing the rules procedures for the pool, e.g. no guests, which you certainly should do, no guests allowed, does the HOA need to go through the process of policy creation, some of which require 30 days of feedback from the membership? You know, unfortunately, you know, I would say, and I know a lot of states, they have very strict meeting requirements, for example, and they are using the business judgment rule as a way to say, look, we are acting in the best interest of the association to relax these procedures and relax these protocols and allow for immediate decision making, or allow for virtual meetings, or forego certain additional timeframes and constraints, because we're trying to respond to this unprecedented issue, and the laws and the procedures have not caught up with us. I think you could probably do that, and if you were challenged, then if your documents say that you require 30 days max to change a rule or regulation, a lot of them don't say that, but yours might. I think you could probably relax it and still be protected by the business judgment rule, because again, what we're looking at is we are responding to an unprecedented circumstances, and we're acting in good faith, prudently, in the best interest of the association in order to make that change, which is ultimately to protect the interests of the residents and the health and safety and welfare of the residents. So yeah, I'm thinking that make sure you look at your protocol, and if a lot of them allow, if we drafted it, we always put in sort of a deviation clause under the circumstances. So look for that. Even if you don't have that deviation clause, I still think that you would be able to address or make those revisions and kind of cut the corners on certain procedural technical requirements if you're doing that in the best interest of the association and it makes sense and it's prudent to do so. Am I understanding this correctly? HOA pools are not yet allowed to be open. Our pools need to be completely resurfaced, etc. If we tell the members how much it costs to run the pools, explain that this amount will be used to resurface and repair this year and not open, we would not be sued for making this decision as a board. That's a mouthful. So first of all, I'm going to jump to the very end. You can't prevent yourself from being sued, and that's not what I'm saying today. People are going to sue no matter what, unfortunately, and whether it's this or some other decision. So you can't prevent people from suing you. What you can do is minimize or eliminate your ability to exposure for liability. So in other words, if you do the right thing, if you act in best interest of the association and prudently, if you use the order and the FAQs in order to make your decisions prudently and in the best interest of the association, you will be protected from liability. That's the business judgment rule. Under the current order, which is in effect till June 1st, I don't see any way that the association should be opening the pool, because the FAQs still say keep the pool closed, and they specifically reference HOAs. There is one section that I discussed, section 1H, which talks about public spaces and allows an exception for indoor public accommodations, so things like maybe condo hotels or hotels. That allows exceptions for personal training. And again, there's conditions for that, which were on the prior slide discussions, and which will be in a blog that we will discuss. But at any rate, no, you should not open your pools at this point. Keep them closed till June 1st. Use the FAQs to do so, and the order to do so to justify your decision. If you are going to open it because you make an argument that the order is not applicable to you and you really do not think that you don't want to comply with the order, and maybe there's very, very little risk of anybody being at the pool, I still say don't do it. But if you do it, or if the state loosens the order and allows you to open the pool, then take all those other recommendations that we discussed in this session, as well as in that post-pandemic blog that we just put out, and follow all those. Okay. And if restaurants can open, I'm not going to talk about restaurants. Personal or personnel training. I don't know what that means, but the statute says, I don't remember the exact language. Personal. Oh, I see. Personal. So personal, like to the person, not employee. And we talked about that as it relates to video meetings. I'm going to keep going for just a few more minutes here because I know that I want to respect everybody's time, and I'll try to get everything here. As it relates to video meetings, if your governing documents call for voting in person, may I confirm Kiowa takes precedence and owners are allowed to vote via video conferencing, or do we need to amend the governing documents? If your governing documents call for voting in person. Okay, so Kiowa, if you're voting in person, you are voting in person via a video conference. Just realize that a virtual meeting or a conference call, you're still in attendance in person. So you're not violating Kiowa, and you're allowed to vote via roll call because you are voting in person or by proxy. So, so there's no inconsistency with Kiowa there. Can you speak again? Can you speak again to indoor fitness center gym openings under the existing state order? So the existing state order, in one section, in 1H, it discusses public spaces, and it essentially says that for personal, I can't remember the exact language, maybe I did have this here. Okay, so today, individuals may participate in local and personal recreation in outside public spaces as an authorized necessary activity, and then there's the groups no larger than 10, practicing social distancing, maintaining 6 feet. But then it says specifically playgrounds, playground equipment, pools, except for use for personal training, amusement parks, arcades remain closed. And then it says personal training and classes in indoor settings are limited, to what they said in section 1H. So that's one section of 1H. There's one section of the order. There's also another order that discusses places of public accommodations, and it specifically names all these things and includes gyms, which are defined to include pools. But again, we're talking about places of public accommodation. So again, you can argue we're not talking about private situations, but places of public accommodations shall remain closed. But there are exceptions. There's a list of exceptions to those places of public accommodations. And one of those things are personal fitness centers and other non-essential personal services that are within these places of public accommodation. And one of those areas that they mention are condominiums. So again, there's some weird ambiguous language, but it's talking about, in that section, it's talking about personal fitness centers and personal non-essential services. It's not talking about pools. In section 1H, it's talking about pools, but it initially talks about public spaces. So it's ambiguous, but I drive everybody again to the FAQ, which is issued by the same department that issued these orders and says, don't open your pool. And it specifically mentions HOAs. One more minute here, and then if I didn't get to your question, I'm sorry. You can email me, and I'll try to get those questions, or you can post them to our website, and we'll respond to them that way. And chances are we'll take some of these additional questions and turn them into a blog as well. Is there a date of when the pools can be open yet? Doesn't say, but the safer at home order is good until June 1st, 2020, and then who knows what will happen after that. Okay, let's just. There's variances for Larimer County. There's potential variances. I don't know if they've applied or Weld County has applied for a variance and been approved. I know certain counties have been approved for variances. I don't know the listing of those counties. What we might do is update some of our information under COVID-19 resources so you know what that is, but that changes all the time. So you should do your own research on that and have the attorney or have the your board members kind of review and keep up to date on those local orders. Okay, so it's 1:50. I think that I should probably stop now since we're over 20 minutes from the actual class. So I'm going to stop the recording. And again, I thank you so much for attending. We did record this session. We will be posting it, once the link is ready, we will be posting it. So those of you who weren't able to attend the session, or your other board members or managers, we will have the video available, so don't worry about that. We will continue to provide as many resources as we can as the orders change and as our recommendations might change depending on what we're hearing from local state orders and CDC and all that kind of stuff. We will continue to have blogs and all of that. But I really, really appreciate you sticking through this particular presentation. I know this is important for everyone, and thank you for taking the time and for making yourself informed. This is another way that you can be informed in making your decisions, is attending sessions like this. If you want us to do some more as a law firm, we have the Altitude Community Education, all of our ACE and webinars and everything. Let us know. Send us an email, post something and say, could you do something here? Can you do a Zoom session here? Can you do a Q&A session? Whatever it is, let us know, and we will try to accommodate that. But again, I thank you, and I'm going to go ahead and sign off. Have a great rest of your week, and I'll see you at the next webinar or the next Zoom session. Thank you so much. Bye.